Welcome to the Tiga Tactics Podcast, a show about self-defense for civilians by civilians. We discuss all things personal protection, including martial arts, combat sports, and street combatives. Our resident MANs, martial arts nerds, include co-founder of Tiga Tactics and holder of 8 black belts in different styles, Dr. Conrad Bui.
Hello, everybody.
We also have black belt in 4 different styles, and the other co-founder, Patrick Vuong.
Greetings, podcasters.
And I'm your other co-host, active duty Army Special Forces soldier and champion obstacle course racing athlete, Evan Ultra-OCR man Perperis. Today, we're going to be talking about Modern Army Combatives Program. So just like we did a kind of like a deep dive into Pakiti Tirja with Patrick, and we talked about Muay Thai with Dr. Conrad, we're going to be talking about the Army's Combatives Program today.
I'm excited.
Yeah. So I guess I'll start off with kind of like just explaining a little bit about the program, and then Patrick and Conrad, you can jump in asking questions from that point forward.
All right.
All right. So Modern Army Combatives Program, that's for lack of a better term, the Army's current martial arts. And it's kind of a combination of Muay Thai for their striking, it's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for their grappling, and then there was a bunch of weapons-related kind of retention stuff and ability to draw weapons that was added in post-2009 based off lessons learned from the war on terror in Iraq and Afghanistan. That's kind of like the broad stroke once over the world of like what it is.
All right.
Cool.
So why don't we start with this? Does every person who is part of the Army, every member of the Army go through this combative program?
So that was kind of the intent at some times. It's not actually a hard requirement. So there's been times when they've had it in basic training and it's been part of what they do. I think now they get exposed to a little bit, but they don't get quote unquote certified in basic training. To get certified, there's basically 3 different levels. So the first level is called the Basic Combatives Course, formerly called Level 1. It's 1 week. It's 40 hours of instruction. It is your place of duty Monday to Friday. The next course is called Tactical Course. It's 2 weeks. It's 80 hours. Again, kind of that's your place of duty for those 2 weeks. And then the final course at the final level is called Master's Course. It's a 4-week course, 160 hours. Again, that's your place of duty. And you don't really learn many new techniques in the Master's Course. It's mostly relearning all the stuff, the basic and the tactical course, and kind of refining that skill and then being an instructor. So the idea is the Army is really good as general at like bringing people up very quickly to a baseline level of competency, but then it kind of like stalls out. And that goes for fitness, it goes for shooting, and it goes for martial arts, it goes for combatives, right? So they can bring you up really quick. And then if you don't continue to train outside on your own, you will stagnate very quickly. And so like if you ever met someone or trained with someone who just did the Army Combatives Program and then did not do follow-on training, they're just not going to be good, right? It's just like doing fitness for 2 months and then being like, okay, I've got all the fitness I need. It's like, no, that's not really the way it works. So yeah, and same thing with shooting. Yeah.
And so
when you
sorry, go ahead, Patrick.
just question. So when you say, you've got the first level is 1 week, second level 2 weeks, how do you go about saying, yeah, I want to take that? And how do you, did they just, okay, we're going to reassign you for that amount of time? Is that literally how it works?
Kind of, yeah. Every major base, right? So Fort Riley, Fort Bragg, which is now called Fort Liberty, Fort Benning, which is now called Fort Moore. All the main bases, like the ones with the big units will typically have a combatives program, and they typically run the basic and the tactical course, so levels 1 and 2, at those locations. The master's course is it's only held in Fort Moore, formerly called Fort Benning, Georgia. So if you want to get to that 3rd level, you have to go temporary duty to that location. You can get it. Occasionally, they will travel around and do like call mobile training teams, where they'll come to a base and they will run the base. They'll run the course at that base. But yeah, generally, you basically just tell your chain of command that you want to go to the course, and if they have slots available and they deem they don't necessarily need you for that week or those 2 weeks, they will send you. And it looks, for the basic course, we get a lot of very junior soldiers, so guys who've been in the Army, less than a year, and new officers. And then for the tactical course, we tend to get people who've been in the Army for a couple of years. And then the idea is for the master's course, people who've been in a little bit longer, right? But I'd say the majority of them are on the newer side of soldiers, right? I went through the original basic course in 2009, and then I re-went through everything in 2023, and I was a major, and that was very unusual. I was definitely the only major in the course, and I don't think we even had any other officers. It was basically enlisted guys, all non-commissioned officers, sergeants.
And well, what's the combatives program like for just basic training? Is there even a combatives program for that?
I don't think I think they teach some of the basic course at basic training, but they don't teach you like the full 40 hours. There's just so much stuff to teach a soldier, especially in that
Mhm.
basic training. They just don't have time for it, right? So I mean, they got to learn everything from like how to put on the uniform, customs and courtesies, how to shoot a rifle, how to do information, all the drill and ceremony, all the tact, right? Like they're trying to cram so much into those couple of weeks or months, rather. They have those soldiers. They don't have time for a full combatives kind of course. And I know you're like, well, the Army's main goal is like fighting. And it's like, yeah, but the Army's also full of all sorts of different military occupational specialties, MOSs, their jobs, right? So the people like they'll have guys who are going to be on the front lines fighting, but then you also have someone who's handling your paperwork, and you have the nurse, and then you have the engineer, and you have the tanker, and you literally have the full spectrum. Like every job that's in the military and the civilian side, there's typically a equivalent job in the military side. So it's just because someone's in the Army doesn't necessarily mean they actually do the fighting, and
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily mean they'll be going out on the front lines. I'll caveat that though with there's like a fairly, for those who are alive then, there's a fairly famous story about I believe the 507th Maintenance Company during the initial invasion of Iraq. Essentially, it's a logistics unit. They are not supposed to be on the front lines. They take a wrong turn. They get captured during the initial invasion of Iraq. PFC, or Private Jessica Lynch, was like the famous name that's associated with that mission. So essentially, they get captured, right? So it shows that really anyone can be on the front line. It doesn't matter if
Mhm.
you're a support unit, and it doesn't matter, especially that was the initial invasion, right? Post initial invasion, Iraq and Afghanistan, there was no quote unquote front line. Essentially, if you left the base, that is the quote unquote front line, right? Because it was counterinsurgency. So we're fighting in cities and streets, and there's no clear battlefield as far as like here's the front, here's where the rear lines are. So really, it's a valuable skill that anyone should learn, and you'd be surprised the amount of resistance we get about people coming and training combatives, and like you would think the Army's like very supportive of it, and in some places they are, but it's largely personality dependent. So sometimes you almost have to sell people on like why soldiers need to know how to fight. It's pretty wild.
Right. And so back to the basic training, what is that? A day, half a day, 2 days? And what's in the curriculum for just the basic training?
Are we talking the basic training or basic combatives course, the 40-hour course?
Just the basic boot camp.
Ooh, I don't even. So that would be a question for my my NCOs I work with. They were drill sergeants. I honestly don't know off the top of my head. I know it's usually a couple of hours, my understanding, and it involves like a lot of grappling stuff. So basic body positions and kind of the
Mm.
stand like basically very early Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, like beginner Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu stuff, like sweep, armbar. Here's the positions. Here's how to do a rear
Right.
naked choke. That's it. You know,
Oh, cool. Oh, well, what about when you went through the training? That just the very basic training.
the
Do you remember what you learned at that time?
so when as an officer, I went through. We didn't do any combatives at like my officer basic course, they call it.
Mm.
We did absolutely zero. We did zero at the kind of the preparatory course we did as an officer, essentially between my junior and senior year of college. The first time I was officially exposed to Army combatives, we did some of it at my unit in the 101st when I got there. First time I was officially exposed was at the captain's career course. So it's you've been in the Army for about 5 years and you go to this captain's course. And that's when I went through, they put us through the full basic combatives course, or level one, as it's sometimes called. Instead of doing it all in a week, which is actually a little bit easier because you can retain the information, ours was
Mhm.
spread out over, it was like 3 months. So you go to
Mm.
like unless you studied on your own, like I felt like none of it stuck. So yeah, it was hard. I wish in hindsight, I wish it would like taken notes and like gone home and studied every day and like practiced before the next time we had that class. But it was like once a week, and it was, training jujitsu once a week. Can you? Yeah, I mean, with no experience, like, I mean, how good are you going to get in 2 months? Or 3 months?
Very, very hard.
Yeah.
And so are you able to share with us just broadly what's in the curriculum for the basic, intermediate, and then the masters?
Yeah. So it's essentially white to blue. As far as the white to blue program I took for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, the Pedro Sauer curriculum, it's essentially that, but kind of stripped down and streamlined. And we don't use terms like Americana or Kimura because I don't know, there's legal issues with using those names. And we don't use the term like gable grip. So there's all these like weird armyisms where like, oh, you can't say gable. You can't say gable grip. So we say wrestler's grip. You're like, okay, whatever.
Oh, wow.
You can't say Americana, so you have to say bent armbar. You can't say a Kimura, you got to say reverse bent armbar. Right. So they're trying to avoid any kind of legal battle with any of the jiu-jitsu heads or whatever. I don't know.
I started imagining like these really bad euphemisms, like don't use the Kimura, use the Japanese guy who came to Brazil and taught this, destroyed a bunch of people. Yeah, that one. Use that one.
My understanding is when they initially got the program, they got it from the Gracies. That's how they developed a lot of it. And then when I think as the program developed and started getting legs of its own, I think essentially the Gracies wanted more compensation above what like the initial contract was. And then I think that's my understanding. And then they basically were like, all right, we're just going to change the names of everything. So you can't say we stole your stuff. I think that's what happened. Yeah. Through the rumor mill. But yeah, so the three levels basically cover essentially white to blue curriculum. Again, the problem is you'll learn all the moves, but how good is someone at doing those moves, right? Like how can you but you can feel the moves open, and when someone like starts maneuvering into a position where it sets it up. So just because you can do the move on a training dummy doesn't necessarily mean you can do it against a resisted opponent while rolling. So that's primarily what the jiu-jitsu consists of, basic white to blue stuff. The striking is basically, again, kind of basic Muay Thai, round kick, switch kick, jab, hook, cross, uppercut. The standard defenses, slip, bob and weave, stuff like that. And then the weapons retention, that one, again, that kind of gets into a little more, people get kind of cautious whenever you talk about that stuff. But honestly, it looks a lot like some of the stuff you guys teach about, kind of keeping that space and having access to be able to draw your weapons and controlling the person. So the Army's kind of motto is for combatives is they call it the 0 meter range, which I think is hysterical and great. Right. So there's the 0 meter range, and like the big thing on everywhere, it says like close, dominate, finish. Right. So with soldiers, right, anytime we go into a house or go into a combat situation, our primary plan is going to be to like use our primary weapon, because I'm literally holding a gun. Right. It's not like I don't have to draw my gun like I would if I was concealed carrying. Like I'm physically holding the gun. All I have to do is flip the safety switch and then pull the trigger. So that's going to be our primary method. Our backup would be to essentially use a secondary weapon, right? So if I had a knife, I could use that, or a pistol. I could use that. And then if neither one of those works, or I can't access them or whatever, then my third plan would be to close, dominate, finish, right? So I close the distance, take him down, get into a dominant position, and finish the fight, however that may be. And then there's also, right, I can also just survive and because I'm probably not by myself. I can let my buddy come in and soccer kick him in the head, right? Like all I have to do is survive long enough to not get stabbed or shot or choked out, and my buddy will come in and save me. So, when you put it in that perspective, some people are like, well, then why do I even need to be able to fight? And when I talk to people about the program, I always tell them, well, listen, combatives is high stress decision making. We take young soldiers and young leaders, and we put them in an environment with an elevated heart rate where they're sweating, where they're stressed out, and there's someone else physically trying to choke them unconscious or hyperextend their arms. It is a stressful situation, especially if you're not used to that stuff. So we put them into these high stress these high stress environments and tell them to make a decision. And the consequences are immediate. They're immediate. It's immediate feedback. If you put your arm in the wrong place, someone hyperextends your arm. If you turn the wrong way, someone takes your back and starts choking you. So we can find out now in a nice, safe training environment, like on a mat, air conditioned, well lit, or you cannot find out, and we can go to Iraq, or some other location, and you can find out downrange when there's no second chances, right? And someone's actually trying to kill you. So I think that's the really selling the point of the program. It's that ability to make decisions under pressure. And I don't know what you guys thought on this, but one of my friends, John Jordan, who I just had on the other podcast I host, Strength and Speed. I don't think he said it in the episode, but we were talking offline, and he's like, the guys who are good at making decisions under high stress tend to be good at making decisions under high stress, regardless of the situation, whether it be on the mat, like being choked out, or doing something physically fit, or just like simple daily activities when it comes to making decisions at work, when it has to do with like PowerPoint slides and, nonsense where there's really, the worst consequence is someone on your chain of command is going to get frustrated and maybe have a couple of harsh words for you. So, yeah.
Right.
I would agree.
I was, yeah, go ahead, Patrick.
I was gonna say I would agree. I've very rarely found somebody who performs at a really high rate, a really high level, involving, whether it's life or death, or it's combat sports, or ultra, OCR. If they can make good decisions at that level, they'll be more calm when they drive. Usually, that's my observation. They'll be more calm in high stress meetings. They'll be more calm when they're having an argument with somebody. I think that's a skill in itself, understanding that physiological side effects and compensating for it, and still being very clear-minded.
Yeah.
So I see that across the board, generally speaking.
So the high stress decision-making thing is kind of that's my interpretation. The official 2 stated goals of the program are instill the warrior ethos and enhance battlefield survivability, which when you look at those two, and I compare them to what Tiga Tactics teaches, that's mindset and skill set, right? Enhance warrior ethos is mindset, and enhance battlefield survivability is skill set. It's literally the same thing, 2 things you guys teach. And we barely touch on tool set in the course. Like it's like a passing thing. I mean, because it's not like, hey, are you going to hit him with the muzzle of your M4, or is it going to have like a silencer on it? Or are you going to have like, what optic are you going to have on your M4 when you muzzle thump him? It's like, well, who cares? Like you have the tool in your hand. It's just like the knife. You have the knife in your hand. It's pointy. You put the pointy end in the bad guy, So I thought, another reason when I found you guys, I was like, this is like, it's just like everything's just kind of like lining up. And, so the putting soldiers through that course, again, it puts them in those high stress situations. We do scenario training in addition to like rolling. We put them into a guy goes in with like a full blower suit, and the soldier comes in, and we try to take their weapons, and they have to essentially detain us and kind of restrain us. Right. So, sometimes when people think combatives, they think it's an MMA fight club, and it's not. We're training for real world stuff, and we're training to deal with the kind of situations you'd have downrange. So, I've personally never gone into a room in Iraq and done a double leg and put someone into an armbar. I do know guys who have double legged people in Iraq, right? It happens. I personally have not done it, but what I have done is gone into a room and had to control someone who's being unruly. And that is part of the combatives course. And the same person who can do wrestling, who can do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, is the same person who can control someone when you're wearing 50 pounds of kit or more, and they're freaking out, and there's multiple people in the room, right? Again, all these things they're overlapping circles of competencies.
Right. I want to go back to that subject about remaining cool under pressure, making those decisions under stress, and how that relates to training, especially something like whether that's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or Muay Thai. People who practice those arts, they're under stress quite a bit, and I think not just the techniques and the endurance but also just being able to suffer and making those decisions under that duress is a skill set that people don't acknowledge enough who train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or Muay Thai, being calm in the eye of the storm. I want to bring up this topic because I was talking with a friend, and he teaches Silat, and he was like, oh, they're doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu over there. It's not realistic for the streets. It's not this. It's not that. And I thought, well, you're training this soldier, and you're hoping that they can come out and use their skills. And to me, I thought Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was a great approach because a lot of these recruits or soldiers, they might have never experienced violence ever in their life.
Mm-hmm.
And to be under that pressure, somebody on top of you, they're mounting you, or they're in side control and they've got all their weight on you, that can freak some people out. And if you're able to remain calm in that situation, I think they'll carry over more likely in a real combative situation than if you were learning all these intricate techniques and theories and such. So I thought the introduction of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was a very smart move, especially for people who have never experienced violence. They can experience this pressure in a safe way. And I think Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, as far as I know, is possibly the only art where you could go 100% and be relatively safe. So I could go 100% with a college wrestler, and I would feel relatively safe. If I was to go 100% against a college boxer, no, I would not feel relatively safe, because there's always that chance of those punches getting in, or even when you take it on your glove, you're absorbing some of that brain damage still. So Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, some martial artists think, oh, it's just rolling on the ground, and it's very sportive, and also for the street, it's not very practical. I don't think that's the point. The point is to get people inoculated to all the stress, the adrenaline dump, and teaching them to remain calm in the eye of the storm in a safe way.
No, 100% agree. I agree with all that. Yeah, some people will go, well, you're in combat, so I can bite and I can eye gouge and all the other stuff. And that was part of, I'm going to give you a jump. We're going to give you a very brief overview of the history of Army combatives. All right. 1852, French bayonet manual is translated by Captain George McClellan. And that was our fighting method, which is essentially bayonet fighting until about World War I. World War I happens, bayonet fighting inside of a trench doesn't work so good. So they kind of reevaluate things. World War II happens. They use gutter fighting essentially. So Sykes and Fairburn and all the, the defendu, eye gouges, shin stomps, and all the stuff that, anyone who thinks of World War II combatives, that's what we had for a while. And then in between that, between World War II and kind of the Modern Army Combatives Program, there was a period where it was basically like, who's your local black belt? So if you had a black belt in your unit, that's what you learned. Regardless of
wow, that's kind of interesting.
Right, yeah. So it was just like, oh, you have a Silat guy? I guess we're learning Silat. Oh, you have an Aikido guy? I guess we're learning Aikido. You've got and then kind of 1993 UFC 1 happens, kind of shows the world the importance of grappling, and then 1995, a guy named Matt Larson, still involved he teaches at West Point right now. He's the founder, the godfather of Modern Army Combatives. He, along with a couple other people, kind of developed this program with the help of the Gracies. They looked at Sambo, they looked at Judo, and they kind of went with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with some of the throws from Sambo or some of the throws from Judo. But one of the reasons we don't teach the biting and eye gouging and stuff like that was because it was hard to train, right? Like I can't, and you nailed it, Conrad. You're like, I can't eye gouge and kick my opponent in the groin more than a couple of times before no one wants to train combatives anymore. Like it runs out real fast, right? The Marine Corps had something called line training, which essentially a guy does a move and you have a predetermined bunch of responses, which involve like eye gouging and groin stomping and stuff like that. And again, that's great. but you can't go fully resisted, which is why that kind of program died out. And there's no competition. And one of the things that makes the soldiers better is competition, right? So the fact that we do competitions in the Army for Modern Army Combatives, it makes soldiers train harder. It makes them more physically fit. It makes them getting used to higher stress. And then they get to kind of put it on display for everyone to see at these competitions that are held at bases and then sometimes at the national level.
Very cool. I like the idea of what you just said, how it gives them a goal to become better, to compete. And when you're competing, everything, all your, not to out myself as a nerd, but like all your attributes, your strength +1, agility +1, all these things, they all rise because you are competing. And of course that means rules, but there's that fine balance, like you said. You just, some things you just can't practice.
One of the things that makes like the Army Combatives competitions interesting is, so essentially the qualifying rounds, the first couple of rounds are all grappling based. So it's no striking, it's stand up to takedown and then into submission. And unlike jiu-jitsu, like if you pull guard, essentially the other guy gets points for a takedown, right? Because we're trying to encourage people to stay in the top position. So like even being in someone's guard, they consider the person in the guard the dominant position. So that's the first couple of rounds. And if you make it to the semifinals, they call it pancration. So it turns into essentially open palm slaps, kicks, and knees, and then is still standing to take down into submission, or if you slap the guy enough times, the ref will stop the fight. And then the finals for individual essentially look like MMA, except you have pants on, you have shin pads on, gloves, and you go into you don't go into an octagon because again that is a copyrighted term, and we're not trying to get sued here. You go into a tactical safety enclosure, which happens to have 8 sides, and you fight it out. You fight it out.
I love it.
Inside the tactical safety enclosure. And so we just did a competition a couple of weeks ago on Fort Riley where we actually went through those 3 stages. And again, some people were watching the fights and they're like, oh, you refs were stopping the fights early. It's like, again, these are not professional fighters. When someone's in the mountain getting pummeled and they're not putting up like an active defense, it's probably over. Like at that point, I'm probably just waiting on like blood, like lots of blood or unconsciousness. And these are not professional soldiers. They're not professional fighters, right? They have to go back to work the next day, right? Like and the Army has to pay for their medical bills, right? So the goal is to, again, and we're trying to instill that warrior ethos. They say the Army kind of tagline for combatives is the defining characteristic of a warrior is the willingness to close with the enemy, right? So that's what we're trying to instill. But doing it in a fun, competitive environment. And Patrick, like you said, to +1 up all your attributes there. Mm-hmm. So, and then actually the national competition, they take the top couple teams and it turns into essentially a tactical lane at the end. So you put on full kit, and then a lot of times you'll have to fight people wearing your full kit against guys in like blower suits type stuff. So they evaluate tactics and weapons retention and stuff like that. So I think it's the only competition, at least I know of, and that the guys I work with know of, where the rule set is progressive. It changes the deeper into the competition you go.
That's fascinating.
That's pretty cool. So that it evolves.
and it's also safer, right? So you get wide range of experience in the military. So if you have a guy that's was like a semi-pro boxer, Golden Gloves boxer, and he's in the military, he's not just going to go in there and give some poor private brain damage on like the opening day qualifiers, right? You have to be good enough at grappling to make it to the point where you can start striking. So it's kind of interesting. So you'll see some sort of like some weird mismatches, and then you'll also see some, even some people that make it that far will be like, well, I'm going to throw away all my grappling and just head punch for the next, 3 minutes and see how it goes. So yeah, some of the matches are interesting. But I give them a lot of credit, all the soldiers that get in there and battle it out. It takes a lot of takes a lot of guts.
Yeah, for sure. I've seen the footage and the streaming that you shared. These are solid athletes, and I would imagine that as the years go on and the popularity of the UFC and henceforth the popularity of BJJ, Muay Thai, MMA, you're going to see some seriously skilled kids in these competitions.
Yeah, you do. You know, we from my team alone, we had a couple of brown belts go and compete. One of our guys just graduated the master's course literally last week, and there was two. I think it was a second-degree black belt in his class and another first-degree black belt, and then he was a brown belt, BJJ guy. So it just kind of split 50-50, at least as the two master courses I've had exposure to, or I had friends go to. You get like 50% of the guys who have like wrestling, you know, they're high school or collegiate wrestlers or BJJ guys, and then 50% of the people are like, I'm just a random army dude who liked combatives, and I'm on level 3 of the course. Like, let's see what happens.
No.
So those guys have a rougher time, obviously.
That is very cool. Speaking of the overlap, some of our older listeners might remember Tim Kennedy when he was both in the Army and fighting in the UFC. Was he a big influence on you or anybody else in your division or your unit as you were going through the Army?
Not me personally, because I just didn't get into like the martial arts side of things until a little bit later in my career. But I did listen to his audiobook. I thought it was really good. We almost crossed paths on like 3 different occasions. Like he was at Fort Campbell for like a UFC fight when I was at a course, so we didn't there. We missed each other there, and then he was on one of my deployments. Like I think he came through my base, but it was like the month before I got there or something like that. Randomly, I emailed him after listening to his audiobook, and he responded. He was like, "Oh yeah, let me know next time you're in the area. We can go grab a coffee." I was like, "Cool." So not a direct influence for me personally. We've had him. We've had I think Brian Stan and then Colton Smith.
Yep, Brian Stan.
Are 3 of like kind of the bigger names in MMA that were also in the Army. And I think those are like I think the Army underutilizes them as potential for recruiting. If I was the Army, I would lean into that hard, and I would. I don't know if the Army funds any of their stuff. I would fund some of their stuff. They already have the skill level. Why would I not use that as a recruiting out? I don't know. Like, if I was the Army, I would fund a lot of my obstacle course race 2 stuff. And I know, oh, that's selfish. Like, but you can lean into that. Example: we had a guy in the Army, National Guard, won the Spartan World Championships, and it was not on any sort of social media platform on the Army at all. Period. 0, nothing. I was like, what are you guys doing? And he funded his own way. Again, it's just, and I think I've gotten 2 or 3 at First Infantry Division has posted about me doing obstacle course race stuff, I think twice. And then my last unit posted about it once. But again, I think they underutilize those existing skills to help with recruiting. But I don't know, maybe things are changing.
Yeah, I think marketing wise, that's a missed opportunity, definitely.
I agree.
Speaking of what you might change, is there anything in the Army Combatives program that you would change?
Oh yes, there's a lot. This is a decent amount. So the first one is something interesting. We actually do mixed gender. So the competition is co-ed. There's no female. Wow. So the females get a 15% weight allowance, and I think for the I think that's okay. But the main goal of the Army's Combatives program, again, warrior ethos, battlefield survivability, right? So if it was up to me, I would create a separate women's division, because I think there's a lot of women who don't come into training or don't continue down the competitive path because they don't want to fight men eventually. And yes, I know when they go to combat, they're going to have to fight men. But if I can get women training and increase their warrior ethos, increase their battlefield survivability, that's the ultimate goal. I don't care if they don't compete in the national level competition. I would create a separate women's division to get more women in the program. And you know what? And then if women, like the really high level women, if they want to come over and fight with the men, then go for it, right? And give them that 15% weight allowance. So yeah, that's one of the things.
So have you seen that?
Yeah. So
has there been some females in there dominating?
Yeah. So I mean, they've had females win at all for some weight classes. It's typically the lighter 2, maybe the third one, 3 lightest. Right? There's 8 different weight classes. Wow. The lightest one is like almost so light that you almost have to be a female to even be in the weight class, because it's like 110 10 pounds or something, right? Like,
Oh,
but they're, the 2 years ago at the national competition, female was just jiu-jitsu. I think she was a brown belt or black belt, was just manhandling people, just obliterating people, right? And gets all the way into the finals where it turns into MMA, right? And the crowd's watching, guy and a female go into the center of the ring, and the guy throws like a overhand right straight down the pipe and just blasts this soldier in the face, female soldier, and people are like, ugh. Like, like any other, if it was when it's male versus male, everyone's cheering. When it's male versus female, people get very, very uncomfortable. I was uncomfortable. And one of my coworkers is like, "Oh yeah, everyone's looking down at their phones now. No one's cheering. Like, you asked for this, people. You asked for it." And I'm like, "I didn't ask for this." So,
well, I gotta say though, kudos to her for making it that far and for manhandling some of those guys there. There we go, technique and
yeah,
time on the mat and training, it pays off.
yeah, and so occasionally, typically, if they make it to the finals, at least again from my middle limited experience, the men will outstrike the females, 9 times out of 10. It's a matter of, can they close the distance to get into the grappling situation. Or sometimes you have a male who's not comfortable hitting a female, and he will try to beat her by pure grappling. That happens. It happens fairly frequently, even in like the pancration, like the open palm slaps. Some guys are just they're not okay hitting a female. It's just like, like, I understand that I understand we might lose, but like, I'm just not doing it, period. Right.
Right. Okay. So sorry, back to what would you change or improve upon the program?
Okay. We got a couple things. So there's no belt system, right? There's no like white belt, brown belt, black belt, etc. But we do have the 3 levels of courses. So one of the things I would do to like encourage soldiers to take the courses is just like assign a belt color to those 3 courses, right? So the Army has a couple of authorized belt colors, right, that are already approved: green, brown, black, and kind of like a sand colored, right? So I would use like sand as like I have no training, and then I would use green as the basic course, brown as tactical course, and then black as master's course. And it's a lot of people are like, "Oh, but you're not a real black belt." And it's like, well, I know you're not a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, but like, you need to give soldiers some sort of, soldiers like, they like tchotchkes, they like things on their uniform, right? Like, and you need to give them something to like encourage them to come back. And I think something simple like that, we've already have the colors authorized, we already have the courses in place. That's something I would do. And then if we wanted to take it to another level, I would add like essentially little pieces of tape on their belts to show like, all right, if you're a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu blue belt, you put a blue belt on your belt, right? So you can have a mismatched belt colors, right? So like, I have a black belt in combatives, but I would have a blue stripe because I'm a blue belt in Jiu-Jitsu on my belt. And it's a way to show skill level without necessarily implying that someone who has been to the master's course is better than a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu brown belt. So we talked about the belts. We talked about the female only stuff. Another thing I do, right? So the combative programs that adopt too much of like the MMA fight culture, fight club type stuff tend to not last long, and they tend to be very exclusive. So as much as we love a lot of the MMA stuff, we want to make sure that we're highlighting the differences between combatives and mixed martial arts. And specifically for the competition, the biggest thing we do every year is, for first infantry division, was like the Victory Week tournament, where again we had like the MMA cage, or I'm sorry, the tactical safety enclosure, and the Lacerda Cup, which is the big national competition in Fort Moore, Georgia. So the 2 things I would kind of modify on that is, one, they typically allow people to like weigh in a day early to get the brackets, and then people rehydrate. And what happens is, again, like all fighters do and everything that has weight classes, people cut weight aggressively, right? Which is not really what the Army does or should do or promote. And to me, like, if you make them do weigh-ins the day of, while logistically it will be more of a pain in the butt, I don't cut weight before I go into a house in Iraq and fight someone, right? So like, why am I cutting weight before a competition? I think you should have to go in at essentially your walk around weight, and yeah, people will be in a slightly different weight class, but I think that helps differentiate us from the wrestling MMA culture and showcase why we're different. And then I would actually change the finals as far as like the MMA style finals. Again, so it's noticeably different because people will watch the MMA finals and be like, well, again, complain that it's not the exact MMA rule set or it stopped early. Like I would, instead of putting dudes in there with like big padded gloves, like they tend to be a little bit thicker. I'm not sure how many ounces they are off the top of my head, but they're not like the normal MMA gloves. They're slightly more beefier. So I would reduce the weight of the gloves, and instead of having them in t-shirts and pants, I would put them in full kit, right? Like you don't have to have the plates in but like having the actual plate carrier on, so they can use that to manipulate and choke someone. And then I put them in like a Protec hockey helmet, which simulates having the Kevlar on, right? So if I punch someone to the side of the hockey helmet, I'm not going to break my hand like I would on a Kevlar, but it does show that it does provide protection, right? So it also increases soldier safety, right? So I think it increases soldier safety. It shows that we're different, and then it makes it visibly different that this is something for combat, and that if you're fighting in kit, then I can use your plate carrier to choke you, right? Just like I can use your jacket, your essentially your BDU jacket, your OCP, whatever you call it, jacket. I think kind of the last change I would make, again, just because I like more training, I would also add in like a civilian or a stateside self-protection course, which not surprisingly, I would basically steal all of Tiga Tactics like flagship courses, and I would literally just smash them into a week of like consistent training, right? Because I think walking around, I spent a fair amount of time deployed. I spent cumulatively about 44 months of my life deployed over my 20-year career. So that's about roughly 4 years. But so 16 years of it, I was home in the States, walking around in civilian clothes without my rifle, without my, unless I have my concealed carry, my pistol, right? I typically have either nothing or a knife or maybe a pistol, right? So I think a lot of the stuff you guys teach as far as situational awareness, which we've harped on a whole bunch, ability to access a concealed weapon or a concealed tool under pressure, the laws of stupid, all that stuff. I think that stuff would really be valuable for soldiers. And we do make the soldiers take a lot of online courses, and a lot of them are a waste of time. The Army loves making soldiers take online courses. Like, well, if you're making me take an online course, why don't you give me something good? Why don't you give me like some credit to Tiga Tactics or some of the other self-defense companies, Tony Blauer's Spear System, Tricom, all this other like this great stuff that's available online from the comfort of your own home. Like I would love as a soldier to be able to access that for free, and improve my warfighting capability, from the comfort of my own home, my free time, rather than having to take online classes about. I'm not even going to list all the topics that we're supposed to take, but it's been reduced over the last couple of years. But for a while, it was pretty ridiculous. But yeah,
Just what are some examples of online classes you had to take?
so a lot of them have to do with some. There's a bunch of like cybersecurity ones, and those are good at first. Sometimes they get very repetitive, right? You have to take them every year, and sometimes they don't change. And then there's some like some of the in-person ones have to do with sexual harassment and stuff like that, diversity, equity, inclusion type stuff. So we do some stuff like that. Obviously, there's a lot of like, we get a lot of safety brings something like drinking and driving and stuff like that. And so you get a lot of substance abuse. You'll have like substance abuse classes and stuff like that. Yeah, well, that stuff's important to touch on. I feel like occasionally the Army spends too much time on it. And they're like, oh, well, that stuff's still happening. It's like, yeah, but everyone knows it's wrong. The people who are doing it just think they can get away with it. So
we
just
talked about
anything else?
Just my
no,
2
sorry.
cents from a retiring Army soldier who's had enough.
So I have one last question. We
Yeah.
talked about the Army Combatives Program. I also know that the Marine Corps has MACP, and some of the
Yeah.
other branches might have their own martial arts programs. How does the Army program stack up to those other branches?
So, speaking of MACP, so MACP, the Marine Corps program, very similar to the Army's. They did include a belt system in that one, which I think is
Oh,
a great idea, right? So there's different colored belts, and they have different qualifications you have to do, and like certain number of hours of training you have to do for those belts, which is great. Um, speaking of the belts, so Matt Larson, the founder of the system, also has like essentially civilian combatives uh, association, I guess what we'll call it, where he does actually award colored belts. And essentially, you not only need to be good at fighting, but you need to have like physically fit, and you need to know some first aid. And there's a bunch of like, essentially, you do a bunch of online requirements. But some of the online requirements are like send in video of some of your competitive fights and stuff like that, and you can get belted in Matt Larson's combatives, which is a cool thing. But it takes to get like to get the black belt at his system, I think would take you probably most of your career, which is great for like a long-term life goal. I think it's a cool concept for him. For the soldiers, most soldiers are not on the line that long, right? So they only have like maybe 10 years on the line, and you've got 1,000 requirements. So giving them something with a shorter term goal to kind of keep them focused and interested, I think is which is kind of why I would want to create the Army belt system. The Air Force program was actually the latest program developed. I think it was, I should know this because I just took their course in the last year. I want to say it was developed in 2019. It was developed much later, and theirs is more academic based. So it is a lot of, they essentially got a bunch of college professors slash like college level people, and they sat around and they came up with a program. So a lot of it is more intellectual. So they talk about the different stress responses. They talk about, like kind of like the color coded systems that we talked about on one of the last podcasts. And it's a lot more designed to teach someone to be an instructor. So they focus more on learning the techniques in detail, and there wasn't a lot of live application in their basic course. Like I did very little active rolling in their basic course, and the Army kind of takes a harder approach of like you're going to suffer at least a little bit this week to get that stress, that high stress decision making thing. So I think it's hard to say which one's the best or which one's better. I think they all have their takeaways and their drawbacks. And I'm not tracking the Navy necessarily has one. I think the Navy might just use MACP, the Marine Corps one. Yeah, the Air Force one also. What's interesting about the Air Force one is their dominant position is knee on belly. It's not mount. And the logic being, if I'm knee on belly, one of my legs is posted, which probably has my sidearm on it. So or a blade, right? So if I'm on knee on belly, I can access my sidearm with less interference, and then deal with the threat that way. So with the Air Force developing their program much later, they had a chance to learn from all the mistakes that the Marines and the Army made, and they developed their system basically from our lessons learned. So I think I want to say Army was first in 95. I think MACP was early 2000s, and I want to say Air Force was 2019. And I'm sure someone will Google that on their own and tell me I'm wrong, but that off the top of my head, that's what I remember.
And that Neon Valley position, I would agree. I think there's police departments that are utilizing that position more now. Just like what you said, it keeps you a little more mobile, keeps your tools away from the bad guy's hands. And the only thing is, it requires some skill. It's almost like surfing. So you do need to have some skill to use that position.
Yeah, the Air Force did a much better job of like talking a lot. Again, a lot of the positions they're assuming you're carrying a sidearm. Some of the Air Force security personnel tend to carry sidearms more than some of the Army people, so I think that might also play into it. But so a lot of their positions were specifically designed to blade the body away to make sure the bad guy doesn't have access to the weapon. So again, the benefits of developing your program after everyone else, and arguably too late, right? I mean, they essentially developed it as we were pulling out of, like we were gone from Iraq and we were pulling out of Afghanistan, around that time. So, you know, but the one thing I'd say the Army did really well is they took, again, the original course had actually 4 levels from 1985, the one they developed it then, levels 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then 2009, a little bit after that, they took the lessons learned from Iraq, Afghanistan, added a lot of the weapons retention stuff in, and then combined levels 3 and 4. So if anyone's previous Army personnel, they'd be familiar with the 4 level systems. And the old 4 levels at one point, I know, had Kali in it, a little bit of like stick work and stuff like that in the level 3. They got rid of that. We did do shock knives though, in the master's course, which again, I'm going to save for the episode where we talk about the knife defense course, because I got to pressure test Tiga Tactics knife defense against someone with a shock knife who did not know the moves I was going to do, right? So there's no chance of him kind of like playing or being compliant, right? He didn't know the techniques I was going to do, which is the Tiga Tactics knife defense, and it worked, which is super cool to see.
Nice, awesome,
So
very cool. So is there anything that you'd want to add or mention about the Armored Combatives program?
I think just that I think it's a great program, and I wish more people would get involved. I didn't get involved till later in my career, again, because I mentioned like that competing requirements. There's just so much stuff on your plate, and I think sometimes people think, oh, well, if you're in the Army, then you got to be good at fighting, and it's like, well, I have to be able to get to the fight first, right? So that's like the first thing, right? I mean, infiltration, it's back up even further. I got to find a target. I got to develop a plan. I got to develop contingencies. I got to infiltrate to the target. I got to breach the target. I got to, make sure security, make sure there's no squirters, capture, control the bad guys. That's where the combative stuff comes in. And then I got to like exfil off the target, right? So and basically go through all the steps in reverse. So there's this huge swath of information, and then be concerned about second, third order consequences. So, we would take tours of civilians onto the base, right? And one of the things I would do is I would take them to a shooting simulator. So air-powered guns, and essentially it's a giant computer game. There's like giant screens, and you shoot the air-powered guns. They look like real M4s, real 240 machine guns at the screen, and you knock over, digital bad guys. And these, like, we'd have high school, teachers come in and shoot, and they'd always have a blast, which was really funny because some of them were not pro, they weren't pro gun, and they were out there like just blasting away on this heavy machine gun. And it was always fun to watch. I always liked it, and it was always cool to talk to people afterwards. The one thing I didn't like about it is it simplified my job I point the weapon at the screen and shoot. When in a real battlefield, I have to do target discrimination. Just because he's a male in the target house with the same name doesn't necessarily mean I can shoot him, right? He's got to present a threat. I have to make that decision in essentially under a second. My teammates are flowing out. I got to make sure I don't shoot my teammates. I got to make sure I don't shoot through the wall, right? There's just so much going into it. And then when you get into special operations, it gets even more in depth, because now you might be operating in a semi-permissive or non-permissive environment, and there's second, third order consequences that come with operating in those type of places. So the long story short, being able to do fighting in the Army and being able to do special operations is a huge pie, and combatives is a small slice of it. However, I think it's an important slice, and I think more people should get involved, not only for being able to make decisions in combat, but like Conrad was saying, being able to make decisions in life. I think that's just a super valuable thing. If anyone wants to see what the program looks like, I used to be in charge of the 1st Infantry Division Combatives program. I'll drop the links down below. 1ID Combatives. It's on Instagram and Facebook. I'm sure they're off doing great things now that I'm gone. I left it in some really good hands with the guys there. But you can go check them out and kind of see what some of that looks like. And then if you want to see what some of the other programs are like, just kind of Instagram search some of the other programs, just basically search for combatives, and you'll find other units putting stuff out. Every unit puts out a little bit different stuff. So I tend not to put out as much video, minus the finals, just because I'm always kind of worried that we're giving away kind of techniques. So I tend to be a little more on the cautious side. So just kind of search around and You'll be able to see what you can find. And then if anyone really wants to see what's in the program, you can buy the Army Combatives Manual online, and you can see exactly. I mean, you can see everything that's in there. Like anyone can buy that manual and read through it. It again, you will look like Muay Thai, you'll look like white to blue Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu stuff, and then you'll see a little bit about weapons work in there as well, and then a little bit about running a tournament and some of the nuances of Army tournament rules. It's probably one of the only field manuals that's interesting enough to read. Most of them are very dry.
Very cool.
I think that's it. I think that's all I got. So
Awesome.
All right. Well, that was a lot. This episode went by really quick for me, so I had a lot of fun there.
awesome. Well, thanks, Conrad, and thanks, Patrick. Any final shout outs we need to give? Upcoming events we got up on the calendar?
Yeah, depending on when this drops, we will be we'll be at Dragon Fest, the three of us. We'll be in Glendale, California, which is close to Los Angeles. Dragon Fest is the biggest martial arts convention on the West Coast. We will be a vendor there. It's a great event because it also benefits the Martial Arts History Museum. So we'll be exhibiting there, hanging out, meeting celebrities, talking to other martial artists. It'll be a lot of fun. So if you guys listening, if you're on the West Coast, please join us. Come hang out with us.
Awesome.
And we have some surprises and gifts for anyone who's coming by. If you're one of our members, or if you've bought a program from us in the past, or if you just follow us on this podcast, come by and say hi. And you'll be able to see, we've got a prize wheel going and everything like that. So come by, say hi, pick up some free gifts from us.
Well, I'm super excited. You guys invited me a couple months ago, and I didn't even know what I was getting into. They're like, we have Dragon Fest going on. I was like, sounds good, I'm in. It's like,
I love it.
and then afterwards, I was like, what did I sign up for? So I figured if you're inviting me across the country to come fly out, I was like, it's got to be pretty good. So looking
You'll have
forward to
fun.
it.
You'll definitely have fun. I'm excited to hang out with you, hang out with Patrick, and meet a bunch of people. And if anyone's on this podcast, come on by and hang out with us as well too, please.
Sounds good. Again, we will drop a bunch of links in the show notes down below. One ID Combatives down below. Links to train with Patrick and Conrad online and the Tiga Tactics official suite of online courses. And yeah, it's off some of our personal social media links as well. We will see you in the next episode.
All right. See
Later,
ya.
guys.